30 minutes of meaningful, inspiring television are coming your way. Tonight, a Kansas trailblazer who rewrote the book on what's possible. He never let the color of his skin stand in his way.
I was born in the little two-room shack on the Scott's farm.
Ulysses Lee Rip Gooch is the grandson of slaves and the son of Tennessee sharecroppers. Born in 1923, he was orphaned at age 4. Living in the shadow of Jim Crow, Gooch had the deck stacked against him from the start, but he would not be held down. After serving in World War II, Mr. Gooch set his sights on the sky. He went on to become a commercial airline pilot, successful businessman, and Kansas state legislator. His life story is chronicled in a documentary titled From the Bottom and an autobiography titled Black Horizons. But it's a story worth telling and telling again. We're honored to have Rip Gooch with us tonight, one-on-one. Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Victor Hogstrom, sharing the stage with one of Wichita's most esteemed residents. His story is one of great achievement and inspiration. Mr. Ulysses Rip Gooch is our guest. Thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here.
You grew up in Tennessee, West Tennessee, or may I say northwestern Tennessee, from humble beginnings. Tell us about that.
Well, I was the son of a sharecropper family, the grandson of my latter grandfather. And the success then in that time of the 20s was pretty tough for anybody, but even worse for people of color. And I had the problem of the worst of that. My mother died and left me at 4 years old. So I did start from the bottom.
So why was it so terrible for African Americans in those days?
Well, you know, it hadn't been, at my age, you might be able to tell, it hadn't been all that long since they were freed. And they were accomplishing as much as they could, but it took a while. And we hadn't gone too far yet. So that's about the size of it.
So you were orphaned at 4 years old. How were you taken care of? What happened?
My father's sister, who had never had a child and wanted a child, brought me in. At the time, I didn't have a mother and needed a mother. And she was glad to have a child. And she did the best she could do for me in that time.
And so after Tennessee, after 4 years old, what happened next?
Well, of course, the first 16 years of my life was in a very rural cotton patch, sharecropping, working, going to grade school. And from that, I was able to find a way, which was hard to do because at that time, the bus drivers didn't stop at the black people's house. And so I could...
This is the school bus drivers?
The school bus drivers.
Okay, right.
And so I couldn't get a ride to school, which was about 8 miles from the farm home where I grew up. But I wanted to go. So I started doing a number of different things to try to get myself through the school. I was within a few months of my graduation, and this in 1943, and I ended up in the U.S. military and was placed in the infantry and ended up in North Africa in the mud.
So how did you become a pilot?
At that time, I'd returned to Tennessee, and I was in Memphis, Tennessee. And the ads were all over the paper then for veterans to come out to learn to fly at the local airport. And I did go out and had an interview, as we're doing here, but it didn't get in then yet. They thought that maybe I should go up to Nashville, Tennessee. I said they, the people who owned and operated the school, because they had heard that there were black people now getting some flight training at a school that had started at Nashville, Tennessee. And even though I was in Memphis, thought I'd lived in Memphis for a while, I had to go to Nashville to see about this school up there, and I did. So I entered that school for flight training and completed my private pilot flight training within a month and a few days in a summer advanced program, the accelerated program that they had, and became a private pilot. Probably my next giant step was arriving in Wichita, Kansas in 1952.
So what brought you to Wichita?
I had been flying crop dusters down in Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi because I had found out that after getting out from this flight school that there wasn't any job opportunities to you in the airlines or flying anywhere where you had to be co-opted with other pilots who would be white. But as an individual, you only man in that dusty airplane with inhaling that crap, you could do that, and you get a job doing it, and it paid well. And so I'd flown crop dusters, but it was a seasonable job. And another thing about that, which was a major step, I had become a married man.
Uh-huh.
So my wife was in school teaching, and the season was up.
This is
for crop dusting.
Augusta, right?
Huh?
Augusta?
Yeah, my wife Augusta. She had just started her first teaching job, but the season was up on dusting, and I didn't have anything to do, and I wasn't going to be very friendly received around home there doing nothing. So I went out looking for a possibility to do something and found out that there were recruiting people in Wichita to work for Boeing and building airplanes. And I signed up to come out to be about 6 months, I thought, doing that. That's the way I got to Wichita. So that was my next big step was coming to Wichita and going to work for Boeing.
And after that, you established your own airplane services.
And really after that, but it sort of worked in because I spent 7 years at Boeing. And
so tell us, how did you get your own airplane company started?
The break that came was that one of the people I instructed on the part-time basis was a young attorney who had just graduated from law school a couple of years. And he, as Murdoch, wanted to know why in the world did I keep working at Boeing. And I said I would need money and influence and a lot of help to get away from that to start a business. And he informed me, he says, if you ever want to do it, let me know, we'll put it together. So later in another few things that happened, I did call him to see if he really would back up his words. And he says, I'm ready. And from that was the beginning of me getting into business.
And you obtained a federal contract to deliver?
Well, that again was several years later, but because I was already in business, the reason why I was able to get the contract. But we established the business, and I became a fixed-base operator is the term that we use, where I sold airplanes and new airplanes. I had the distributorship for a base airplane manufactured in Texas called the Mooney airplane. And I had the distributorship for Kansas, part of Missouri, and part of Colorado, and along with the air taxi business and flight instruction. And that had been in operation for a year or two, and along that same time, I had gotten appointed by the Federal Aviation Commission to be a flight examiner to give tests to certify pilots who were attempting to become pilots. And so I was doing all of this before the government contract to fly for the federal airports, with the problem that we had at that time that drove me into that opportunity was the fact that we were having problems as black people doing business, and the government established a business helping hand. It was called 8A contracting program. And that's how I got into the government contracting. They pulled a job that was being done by somebody else and give me half of it.
So, looking at your work and your life as a pilot in the airplane business, would you say you're successful or so-so?
Well, I think I was successful. Like other business people, it has its up and downs. I was successful enough to be able to charter a bank during the time that I was doing all these things. So I had success, and it was an enjoyable life, you know. But there were some bad times, and
tell us about those bad times.
Well, one of the worst things that happened during my moving up was the Mooney Aircraft Company that manufactured airplanes in Kerrville, Texas, as 1966, about that time, I became one of the top distributors. But they had established an investment program, and with each airplane that you got from the factory, you reinvested a portion of that within the company for its growth. And I'd established a sizable amount in the company in certificates of ownership. And I had a sizable sum of this that I was using to back my operation from day to day, and any time I needed a sum of money to do other things, only to find out one day that that wasn't worth a nickel. And the money that I owed the bank says, we'd like to have our money. This is paper, bring us some money.
Right.
That was a hard one.
So what was the highlight of it all, the best time you had as a pilot and in the airplane business?
Well, I think the best thing that I had in my life was the fact that it took me completely away from even looking for something else to do, because I was doing what I enjoyed doing. Mm-hmm. And my idea is if you enjoy what you're doing every day, you hadn't worked a day in your life. So I think that's the best thing I can have to say. I enjoyed what I was doing. If I hadn't been making any money, I would have been flying for somebody else if they'd pay me, if they didn't. If I could.
So after the airplane business, you became a politician.
No, I would like to stop that early. I did not become a politician.
But you were on the city council,
I was an elected official.
An elected official?
Several times.
Okay.
Never became a politician.
What's the difference? Tell us.
I found out politician was a person that worked to get elected next term.
Okay.
And that wasn't what I thought I was. I thought I was an elected official to try to do some things of importance for the people in the country and whoever I represented. And that didn't seem to be what fitted in with the term.
So after being a flight examiner, a commercial pilot, a flight instructor, and you helped charter a bank here in Wichita, you were elected to the city council and became a vice mayor of the city of Wichita.
Right.
And later on becoming...
While vice mayor, I was elected Senate.
Yes, that's what I'm about to say. Later on becoming state senator for the state of Kansas.
Served 11 years.
11 years.
And I left with the idea of writing my life story. And at that time, that my idea was the life story would be called From the Bottom.
And it got changed to Black Horizons.
Right.
One aviator's experience in the post-Tuskegee era.
Yeah, the reason I wrote that and finally decided on that as a subject matter, because in a number of my friends, I became very close to the Tuskegee Airmen because I became a continuous aviator, while most of them left and went into doing other things of importance and were very successful because they couldn't get an immediate job flying after the Tuskegee Institute. So many of those had written books about the Tuskegee experience, which was a great experience to read. And so I thought I would pick up and let people know that there were some things happened after Tuskegee in aviation.
All right, so during all of these things, all that you have achieved, the one person who stood by your side was your wife, Augusta. Tell us about that.
Well, she was...
Did she fuss at you for all this extra work?
No, she was a very loving lady, and she were and a very agreeable lady, and I had a way of keeping her happy too. You know, being a professional pilot, owning airplanes, I could take a week. She could get a day off from school on Friday, so she'd have a long weekend, and we could spend the weekend in Mexico, Bahamas or somewhere. And she enjoyed what I was doing, but she was very interested and very close, committed to the children in school and that life. So we had a very pleasant life and a very agreeable life, and she helped me in any way she could except business. She said, you have to do that on your own. I'm going to save my money for when I need it, I'll have it, and you go lose yours in the business. And
so you had 3 children, right?
Yeah.
And your son, Kerry, shared
followed my step in aviation.
Yes, he followed your step in aviation. Tell us about him.
Well, Kerry started flying. He never knew when he started flying. He sat in my lap on trips when I go to sleep holding on to the control of the airplane when he was 2 or 3 years old. And at his very earliest age of 14, we soloed him in sailplanes. He soloed and glided at age 14. And after that, he acquired his tickets at age level. Whatever age you could get the next one up, he got them on that birthday. And so he spent a period of time at Central Missouri, came out with a master's degree in aviation management, went to work for an aircraft company, and he and one of the senior pilots in sales were on a routine flight, and there was an accident, and they both was lost in the accident. But he was not flying the airplane, and that's a very honest and documented story, even though immediately after the accident occurred, he was named as being the pilot. And I was within hours of making sure that it was a fact that he wasn't, and I had the news people change that in the report. Even the newspaper sent out a sizable disclaimer on it.
So when Kerry died in that accident, did you have any regrets about getting into aviation at all?
No.
Or introducing him to it?
No. We had that talk many times, and it was a definite agreement with us that if either one of us, anything happened, it was not going to have effects on our desire, our interest in aviation. We had talked about that any number of times. But there was one other thing that happened that was very important to me, though. During much time earlier, I had met another person who was an aviator, and this was a long story into that life, but he became a second son to me, and when, well, maybe he hadn't became a second son when Carrie died, but he was very close to us in the family. But when Carrie died, he came to me immediately, and he says, "Don't cry, you still got a son." And he's been that son, and still is, Ed Andrews.
So looking back at the total picture of your life, if you were to change any one thing, what would that be?
Well, I don't know what I would change that I could change, but I think the earliest part of change that could have happened in my life is the fact that I've gathered a very interest in early education. My wife became a preschool teacher and kindergarten and Head Start program, and we talked about this a lot. And I'm so strong about that because I realized that one of the things that, if it had been one thing that could have changed my life, probably would have been the lack of early education. I was raised by parents. My dad signed his checks with an X, but he said he used the big X because he could recognize his X. And my mother was unable to read it properly. So I didn't have a lot of help, and it didn't establish the importance of early education in my life.
If you had a lot of help, would it have made you a different man today?
I think if I had had, I believe that if I had had a better early education, I would have been a better person than I am today. And that's hard to explain, but I believe that it stopped me from making the step progressively.
So what is your message for young people today, especially young African-American kids?
Well, let me say the one other thing that I got, talk about what I missed in lack of education. But one of the things that I got in my early education is from my aunt and her husband, who helped me from 4 to 16. And that was, never say you can't. Mm-hmm. Never say you can't, and believe it in your mind that you can't. You can do whatever it is you want to do if you want to do it bad enough.
Right.
With lack of that early education that I spoke of that I feel like hurt me, I still became the pilot that I wanted to be because I wouldn't accept the fact the government didn't let me do it, enlisted in the service. I used what they did to help me do it under the GI flight training. Mm-hmm. So if you can't do it one way, pick another way.
So do you have a message for young people today, especially young African Americans?
Start off with getting early education, and I hope that your parents of kids understand that.
So you're saying early education is the key to a solid foundation in life.
Foundation. And then after you utilize that to do the best you can with what you want to be, and you can.
Rip Gooch, thank you so much. It's been an interesting story, and for someone who did not finish college and finish high school, hats off to you. Great story.
Well, I feel that I tried to tell that in the book. So if you really want to know it, read Black Horizon.
A shameless plug for your book. All right, thank you. And it was a true honor to have Rip Gooch with us this evening on this program. Thank you for watching this week's edition of One on One. I'm Victor Hogstrom, inviting you to join us again next week when we have another interesting and intriguing conversation. Good night.